movie notes on W. 2008 film, 29 May 2024 viewing. So I uploaded this today, Wednesday, 29 May 2024. So W and then there's a period, or dot, however one wants to pronounce that. And I'm Tanis Coralee Leonhardi, she, her, hers of Seattle. I'm going to go through my movie notes for this viewing. This is my description that I came up with for this viewing. It's a biographical film covering the pathway to being a United States of America president for George W. Bush, as well as the beginning of his presidency. So this film came out in 2008, and he left office per normal in 2009, January. The inauguration of a president voted in November of one year. Currently, at this point in time, is January the following year. So this came out before his presidency ended. So by definition, in that sense, does not cover his entire presidency. And so in terms of talking through the master's thesis, I was talking about like if I move in with my boyfriend Josh Kerr and I go do a master's thesis at the University of Hawaii at Manoa in the English department, focusing on the usage of the word soulmate. There's also things I've brought up in terms of trends of age differences, and then also kind of fieldwork and how autobiographies and biographies are constructed. This is an interesting one for how soulmates meet. So George W. Bush and his soulmate Laura Bush. I actually like Laura Bush. I like, I also like Hillary Rodham Clinton. So they're both first ladies for United States of America presidents in my lifetime. I was born approximately 1993. So they're my two favorite first ladies of my lifetime. And she even brings up, I was watching it, and she's introduced to George W. Bush at a barbecue, and she brings up like something where like they might not get along, kind of thing. Like disagreements are good, there's strength in a relationship, and she sets that tone from the first time they meet. I'm like, that's very much a soulmate pair, right? And she brings up she voted for LBJ, and guess what's on the list for tomorrow to watch tomorrow at LBJ, and I was just like, oh, woman after my heart. That's how you know people are soulmates, is like they interact and like I view it as I watch the wildlife in the backyard, and I've kind of come to terms of like a soulmate is someone where like if soulmates are interacting, it draws one to one's own soulmate, if that makes any sense. And so there's like, and watching it, and like I'm thinking about my own life. So this would be more in line in terms of movies don't really use the term soulmate, though how they choose to portray a relationship can be true to the character of soulmates. Right. And people want to know if I did the master's thesis at the University of Hawaii at Manoa, right? Elon Musk is my date at commencement kind of thing. Would I go on to a dissertation, a PhD after that? And I was like, at this point in time, I cannot see beyond the master's thesis. So that would be it for me, at least currently. And so there's that. One thing I had in terms of like actually how this movie was constructed was they show like clips that are supposed to be like George W. Bush, the president, in action, so to speak, and the actor is Josh Brolin instead of actual footage. However, then they show, I don't actually know, so I'm gonna bring up here, footage of Saddam Hussein over in the Middle East. I'm like, I don't know if that's an actor and those scenes are acted. I don't know if it's computer generated imagery like a lot of battle scenes these days, and since kind of like the Lord of the Rings and before, or I don't know if they actually use real footage. So in watching it, I was like, that kind of stuck out. I was like, I don't know, actually. So there we go. And one of the things that George W. Bush had happened during his presidency that perhaps is most notable is the United States of America was attacked. And the September 11th terrorist attacks happened in 2001 after he was inaugurated as president. So he his presidency kind of came, for some people, their presidency comes to be defined in terms of economics, and for some people it's about national security. And so he was a man very much tasked with the safety and well-being and care of the American people, and he made that. He could have pushed it to the side, which might have been the other end of the political spectrum. He was a Republican. He was like, no, I'm going to put the safety and security of this country first. And a lot of Democrats complained about it, and but I liked the guy. I've not ever been registered as a Republican, but I liked him. He's one of the two presidents I liked at the time, like enough to actually like semi-defend them in public settings. The other would be Bill Clinton, but that was like, yeah. So there we go. Although I do tend to stand up for the presidencies, but like as of like, anyway. Okay. And then I was thinking, okay, so that September 11th terrorist attacks, at least as of filming this for the United States of America in my lifetime, right? Again, born approximately in 1993. That was the worst case scenario of sorts. It was like, could I think of something similar? So, for like a pandemic or something. So, I'm going to see. So, let's say I'm moving with my boyfriend, Josh Kerr. And let's say mom gets some virus. And they say it's so bad that, and she's still able to function well enough that she should be isolated. Like, actually isolated. Like, you know, there are actual bad viruses in the history of humankind that would require complete cutoff from a person, like the bubonic plague, that kind of stuff. And so then say Dad and Kona Doug move in with me and Josh Kerr, and possibly John Dale somehow ends up there as well. And there's a house, and I go over to Leo Marchand, beat us to buying a dream house in Woodway, and he's living in his dream house in Woodway. So I go over to pick up some orange juice. At the time I am there at his house in Woodway, they issue a household isolation order, meaning you're not allowed to go outside of your house. You're required to hunker down, and there's like, it's actually like a really bad virus, so it's like 2 years. And we're like, you know what? We'll give it 24 hours. So we stay home. He has like a conference call or something like that, and it doesn't go so well. So we call Josh and my dad and Kona and John if he's there, kind of stuff. And we're like, do you guys want to come over? And it turns out they actually are happy with the lockdown order. And we're like, so they don't want to come over. And Leon gets really miffed because he's had this really bad conference call. She's like, wifey, what do we do? And I'm like, we're married. My friend. And he's like, I'm Leonhardi. And maybe I even have an Instagram account like that around these days. And maybe not, maybe. Again, I'm like, okay, we're friends. And so I'm like, but he needs cheering up. So we grab our I grab his backpack, my backpack, and I grab us each a thermos, and I put hot cocoa in the thermos. And it's snowing outside, and it has snowed, and there's a fair amount of snow outside, so we can't really drive anywhere. So then I grab, we have, you know, a sleeping bag, and I grab each our sleeping bag, and depending on how big it is, it may or may not go in each of our bags. I grab us each a food item, which I'll explain once we get to our final destination, and I grab a tarp. And we bundle up in warm clothes, and we go out. And we walk to the parks of Woodway are still open. So we walk over to a pavilion in Woodway Reserve. And we put the tarp on the ground, and we each get into our own sleeping bag. And we pull out our thermos, and we each have a box of old-fashioned Franz donuts. And we eat our donuts and drink our hot cocoa. And that's it. And we just kind of relax under the pavilion. We're looking at the snow and making sure to not melt the snow. That's why we take the tarp and put it under us. And we finish it, and we go back to the house. And we're like, well, for real, people don't want to interact with us. And then, so then when we decide, perhaps there's already a maple tree there, perhaps not. So then Leo Marchand orders a special maple tree, whether or not we already have a maple tree on the property, or he has a maple tree on the property, I should say. And he has a ginormous outhouse partially filled with hay. And so we decide to make and spend the next duration of the lockdown, which we are like, you know what, 2 years seems a bit excessive, so we're just gonna tackle a small project. We're gonna try and figure out how to make all donuts. including French crullers. And maybe we'll make some new types of French donuts. And he's like, we'll officially convert all apple fritters to French donuts. And so we take on that task, and we decide that in his specially ordered maple tree, we'll start making maple syrup and storing the maple syrup in jars in the hay in the ginormous or enormous outhouse. And then we also take and spend some time. So this is my current tent, 2-person tent. It's not quite long. He's taller than me by a number of inches. So if he doesn't quite fit, we get a bigger tent. And we sometimes sleep out in the yard in our tent. His tent or my tent, our tent. And we make sure to contact the town of Woodway and be like, we get a nice enough tent that we hope we do not receive a phone call saying there are intruders, homeless people on our property sleeping, because it's just us or his property sleeping. So that's another way of passing time. And yeah, but we don't give up on inviting Josh Kerr and Dad and Kona Dog and John Dale over to visit us. And maybe Sarah Strostrom is already living in Woodway as well, and so we invite her over. And she's like, nah, I got too many squirrels. I'm enjoying my locked-in, man. 2 years of just relaxing. And then she's like, I'm gonna win 10 individual medals at every competition ever after that, you know. Okay, I'm not, but like, you know, she's like, I'm making full use of this rest and relaxation period of my life. So you guys make your maple syrup and send one our way. So yeah, there we go. Or her way. She's our way because the squirrels want some too. And so there we go. And everything opens up, and and somehow miraculously during that period I figure out how to get the dream house, Josh Kerr and my dream house, and then we move all of the people in the Josh Kerr, we figure out how to move them into the household isolation to Cary. Although that might come towards the end of the lockdown for all we know, but maybe not. Anyway, that's like a worst case scenario. So I was like thinking about that through the movie. I was like, oh, and what kind of virus could that be? Or what's something I haven't heard people talk about? Right, so maybe not for that scenario, but like in general, what's a virus that could shut things down pretty severely that people do not talk about? Sure, a fast-acting and rapid-spreading AIDS. AIDS is a sexually transmitted disease. How about a STD that takes off and is like actually bad and acts a lot faster than AIDS and spreads a lot faster than AIDS? That would be, but you see, and then the thing about that is people wouldn't necessarily know at the time that it's STD, right, when it breaks out. So, especially considering people don't really talk about that these days, or they over embellish their sex life or stuff like that. So, yeah, it was like, there's something that would actually be a can of worms these days. That's like a worst case virus, maybe not corresponding to that pandemic. But I was like, that's the best I could do for that worst case scenario planning, per my allowances kind of thing. So those are my movie notes on W. That it was W. 2008 film. 2008 film. 29 May 2024 viewing.